The whiskey burned less than it should have. I'd been nursing the same glass for an hour, watching the liquid catch the lamplight in my study, thinking about how one moment can unravel everything you've spent years building. Outside, autumn rain drummed against the windows of our suburban home. The same house Laura and I had bought 3 years ago when she quit her marketing job to focus on starting our family. I should have known something was wrong months earlier. The signs were there, hidden in plain sight like poorly documented code. But I'm a systems engineer, not a relationship analyst. I solve problems with networks and servers, not hearts and lies. It started with something as mundane as car keys. Thursday evening, October 15th. Laura had rushed in from her book club, arms full of groceries, fumbling with her oversized purse. "Nathan, can you grab my keys? They're somewhere in the black hole," she'd laughed, the same laugh that made me fall in love with her 8 years ago. I'd been working on my laptop, reviewing security protocols for a client's network upgrade. Simple enough, reach into her bag, find the keys, get back to work. My fingers pushed past her wallet, lip balm, tissues, the usual debris of daily life. Then they found something that made my breath catch. A fresh pack of Trojan condoms. Unopened. Still in the pharmacy bag with a receipt dated that afternoon. The world tilted. Not dramatically, not like in movies where everything crashes and burns in slow motion. It was quieter than that. A systematic failure, like watching error messages cascade across a screen when a critical process fails. Laura and I had been trying to conceive for over a year. She'd bought ovulation kits, tracked her cycles, scheduled our intimacy. She'd researched fertility diets, prenatal vitamins, and baby names. She'd shown me Pinterest boards of nursery designs and talked about leaving room in our budget for pediatric visits. Why would a woman desperate to get pregnant buy condoms? "Did you find them?" Laura called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that slightly strained cheerfulness she'd developed lately. "Yeah, got them," I replied. My voice sounded normal. Training in crisis management. Keep systems running while you diagnose the problem. I placed the condoms back exactly where I'd found them, beneath a stack of receipts, and carried her keys to the kitchen. Laura was putting groceries away with mechanical efficiency, her movements quick and purposeful. She'd changed her hair recently, subtle highlights that caught the overhead lighting differently. When had she done that? "How was book club?" I asked, studying her face for tells. "Oh, you know Sarah and her drama. Jennifer brought that quinoa salad again." She didn't look at me, focusing intently on arranging yogurt containers in the refrigerator. Her wedding ring caught the light. She was still wearing it, but I noticed she'd been taking it off more frequently at home, claiming it felt tight. I'd attended enough of her book club events to know the women by name, but lately she'd been vague about details. When I'd asked about the current selection last month, she'd paused too long before mentioning some romance novel I'd never seen her reading. "What's the book this month?" I pressed. Another pause. We're doing a classic. Something by Jane Austen." She closed the refrigerator with more force than necessary. "I'm exhausted. I think I'll take a bath and go to bed early." Jane Austen. Vague enough to be believable, but I'd given her a first-edition copy of Pride and Prejudice for our anniversary 2 years ago. It was still on her nightstand, bookmark positioned exactly where she'd left it after reading the first 3 chapters. That night, I lay awake beside her listening to her breathing, cataloging everything that had changed in recent months. Her sudden interest in going to the gym 3 times a week, new underwear, lacy things that replaced her usual practical cotton, the way she'd become protective of her phone, taking it to the bathroom, keeping it face down during dinner. Most telling was the change in her enthusiasm for our baby-making project. Where she'd once been the one tracking ovulation windows and scheduling intimacy, lately she'd seemed distracted during our attempts at conception, going through the motions but mentally elsewhere. I'm methodical by nature. It's what makes me good at my job. When a system shows anomalous behavior, you don't ignore it. You investigate. You gather data. You identify the root cause. Laura stirred beside me, turning away in her sleep. The digital clock read 2:47 a.m., casting its red glow across our bedroom ceiling. I've always been good at solving problems. This one would just take time. The next morning felt like performing maintenance on a live system. Everything had to function normally while I conducted my investigation. Laura emerged from the bathroom in her terry cloth robe, hair damp from the shower, looking like the woman I'd married. But now I was analyzing her behavior through a different filter. "Coffee's ready," I said, holding out her favorite mug, the one with the cartoon lab that said, "Life is better with a dog," that we'd bought during our trip to Portland last spring. "Thanks, honey." She accepted the mug, her fingers brushing mine briefly. I noticed her wedding ring was missing again. "Ring at the jeweler's?" I asked casually. "Still being resized. They said another week." She moved to the window, not meeting my eyes. "Any plans today?" I kept my tone casual while opening my laptop to check overnight alerts from client systems. "Meeting Jennifer for lunch, then some errands. Oh, and the grocery store again. I forgot milk yesterday." She moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, assembling her usual breakfast of Greek yogurt and granola. Jennifer. At least this was someone I'd actually met, unlike the expanding roster of mysterious friends she'd been mentioning lately. When I'd suggested couples activities with these new friends, Laura always had excuses. They were going through divorces, weren't ready to socialize with couples, needed girlfriend time. After Laura left for her lunch with Jennifer, I made a decision that would have horrified the trusting husband I'd been 48 hours earlier. I drove to Best Buy and purchased a small GPS tracker with cash, the kind marketed for elderly parents or teenagers, technically legal since the car was registered in both our names. That afternoon, I called Margaret Hayes, a divorce attorney whose name I'd found through a discreet Google search. Her office was downtown, in a building that housed wealth management firms and private investigators. Margaret was sharp-featured and direct, probably in her mid-50s, with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen every variation of human betrayal. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming in. You mentioned on the phone that you suspect your wife is having an affair." "I know she is." I explained about the condoms, the behavioral changes, the expanding network of mysterious activities. Margaret took notes on a legal pad, her expression professionally neutral. "Adultery affects property division in this state," she said, "but we'll need documentation, photos, communications, witness testimony. The more evidence you can provide, the better your position." "What about our house? Our investments?" I asked. "Marital property gets divided, but documented infidelity can influence the court's decision about who gets what. The house, vehicles, retirement accounts, all potentially negotiable if we can prove she violated the marriage contract." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "What do you need from me?" "Everything you can document without breaking any laws, phone records if you have access, financial statements showing unusual expenses, and if you can catch them together." She slid a business card across the desk. "This investigator is excellent. Discreet." "I don't need an investigator," I replied. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Cole, I understand you're angry, but this requires professional—" "I'm a systems engineer. I know how to gather data." I pocketed the investigator's card anyway. "What I need is legal strategy." Over the next 10 days, I monitored Laura's movements through the GPS app on my phone while maintaining the facade of normal married life. Her daily patterns were mostly predictable: gym, errands, lunch dates with various friends. But there were anomalies. Stops at locations that didn't match her stated activities. A 40-minute gap at what Google Maps identified as a residential address across town. A 2-hour visit to a coffee shop that, when I drove by later, was clearly closed for renovations. The most damning evidence came from our shared credit card statements. Charges I'd initially overlooked now formed a pattern. A hotel bar in the business district, a lingerie shop she'd never mentioned, a restaurant in the suburbs where she'd supposedly been having lunch with girlfriends. Except the receipt showed 2 entrees and a bottle of wine that cost more than she typically spent on an entire week of groceries. During this period, Laura purchased new clothes, items I'd never seen her wear. A black dress that hugged her figure differently than her usual style. A silk blouse in deep burgundy, heels with ankle straps. When I asked about them, she mentioned wanting something nice for various social occasions with friends I'd never met. By Wednesday, October 25th, I had enough evidence to fill a manila folder. By Thursday, I'd prepared for the confrontation I knew was coming. Friday evening, October 25th, Laura announced she was going to dinner with some friends from work. Another creative alibi, she'd been unemployed for 3 years, focusing on our attempts to start a family. "Which co-workers?" I asked. "Oh, just some women from my old marketing firm. We try to get together once a month." She was applying makeup at her vanity, transforming herself into someone I barely recognized. The black dress, the new heels, her hair styled in loose waves that framed her face differently. "I thought you'd lost touch with most of them," I answered. "We reconnected on Facebook." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You know how social media brings people back together." I watched my wife prepare to meet another man while lying about dinner with fictional former co-workers. The GPS tracker was attached beneath her car's rear bumper, hidden from view, but transmitting her location every 30 seconds. That night, I sat in my study monitoring her movements on my phone. The blue dot that represented my wife's car moved across the digital map, heading not toward any restaurant or reunion, but toward the interstate. 25 minutes later, she arrived at a roadside motel 15 miles outside our suburb. I grabbed the divorce papers Margaret Hayes had prepared and headed for my car. The Sunset Inn wasn't the kind of place you'd find in tourist guides. Single story, probably built in the 1970s, with pink stucco walls and a neon vacancy sign that flickered intermittently. The parking lot was half empty, most spaces occupied by long-haul trucks and cars that had seen better decades. I pulled into a spot across from the motel office, manila envelope containing divorce papers on my passenger seat. My phone showed Laura's car parked near room 117, though I couldn't see it from my position. The digital clock read 7:43 p.m. For 20 minutes, I sat in my car processing the finality of the moment. This wasn't hypothetical anymore. Not suspicious behavior or circumstantial evidence, but my wife at a motel with another man. The GPS tracker had been academic until now, data points on a screen. But Laura was 50 yards away, probably already in bed with someone whose name I didn't even know. At 8:05, a white pickup truck pulled into the lot. Ford F-150, maybe 5 years old, with contractor's equipment visible in the bed. The driver was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. Dark hair, stubbled jawline, the kind of rugged appearance that contrasted sharply with my office worker physique. He walked directly to room 117. No hesitation, no checking room numbers. This was routine. The door opened before he could knock. Laura appeared in the doorway wearing the black dress, her face bright with a smile I hadn't seen in months. Pure joy, unguarded happiness. She looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with, except she was feeling that joy for someone else. They embraced in the doorway, his hands settling at her waist, her arms around his neck. Even from across the parking lot, their intimacy was obvious. This wasn't a new development. They moved together with comfortable familiarity. I sat in my car for another 10 minutes, watching the closed door of room 117, letting the reality sink in. My wife was inside that motel room with another man, probably already undressed, doing things she used to do with me. The woman who'd been too tired for intimacy with her husband for the past month was energetic enough for affairs in roadside motels. At 8:20, I got out of my car. The manila envelope felt heavier than it should as I walked across the parking lot. Room 117 was at the far end of the building, away from the office and main road. Private. They'd chosen well. I knocked 3 times. Firm, authoritative knocks that couldn't be mistaken for housekeeping or maintenance. "Just a minute," came Laura's voice, muffled by the door and slightly breathless. Footsteps. Hushed conversation. More footsteps. The door opened, revealing Laura in her black dress, hair slightly mussed but otherwise composed. Her expression cycled through confusion to recognition to absolute terror in the space of 3 seconds. "Nathan," she whispered. "Laura." I held up the manila envelope. "I brought you something." Behind her, the man from the pickup truck stood near the bed, shirt unbuttoned, looking like he was deciding whether to run or fight. The room smelled like her perfume and intimacy. "This isn't... We weren't..." Laura's training in marketing hadn't prepared her for this conversation. "Laura, meet Derek," I said, gesturing toward the man. "Derek, this is Laura's husband, the one she's been married to for 8 years while she's been f***ing you in motel rooms." Derek's face flushed. "Look, man, I didn't know she was..." "Yes, you did," I interrupted, keeping my voice level, conversational. "You know exactly what this is. You've been meeting here for weeks. You know her schedule, her marriage, her situation." I looked back at Laura. "How long?" She was crying now, mascara creating dark streaks down her cheeks. "Nathan, please, it's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think." I handed her the envelope. "Divorce papers. Adultery is cited as grounds. I have photos, GPS tracking data, credit card records, and now eyewitness testimony." Laura stared at the envelope like it might explode. "We didn't... Nothing happened yet tonight." "It doesn't matter," I replied. Those 3 words hit her like a physical blow. She sank onto the edge of the bed, still holding the envelope. Derek stepped forward, apparently deciding to play the protective lover. "You can't just..." "I can, and I did." I turned to face him fully. "You're Derek Hartwell. You live at 847 Pine Street, apartment 2B. You drive a 2019 Ford F-150, license plate XKV4429. You're a contractor who worked on the Henderson house renovation 3 blocks from mine. That's how you met my wife." His face went pale. I'd done my research. "What I'm trying to decide," I continued, "is whether you're worth the effort of destroying. Laura was my wife, so she gets the full treatment. You're just some asshole who couldn't keep his in his pants. The question is whether you deserve consequences beyond losing your married girlfriend." "Nathan, please," Laura sobbed. "We can work this out. Marriage counseling, whatever you want." "Read the papers, Laura. Don't come home. Your things will be packed and delivered to your parents' house by Sunday. The locks are already changed." I turned back to Derek, who was now fully dressed and edging toward the door. "As for you, Derek, stay away from my wife. Stay away from my neighborhood. And maybe think about whether you want to keep working residential jobs in this area. Amazing how quickly word spreads about contractors who can't be trusted around married women." I walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and Laura? Those work friends you're having dinner with don't exist. Neither does your resized wedding ring or your book club discussions about Jane Austen. Next time you decide to burn your life down, you might want to be less creative with your alibis." I left them standing in that motel room, Laura clutching divorce papers and Derek calculating how quickly he could distance himself from the situation. As I walked back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: complete clarity. The rain had stopped. The neon vacancy sign flickered once more and went dark. Saturday morning brought the satisfaction of executing a well-planned system upgrade. Every component fell into place. The locksmith arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, a competent man named Rodriguez who asked no questions about why I needed every lock changed on a weekend. While he worked, I moved through the house systematically, packing Laura's belongings into storage boxes I'd purchased the night before. Her clothes, jewelry, personal items, photographs where she appeared alone. I left our wedding album. She could ask for it later if she wanted reminders of what she'd destroyed. Margaret Hayes had prepared me well. The bank accounts were already secured. Our joint checking account had been closed Friday afternoon. The balance transferred to a new account in my name only. Laura's credit cards were canceled. Her car insurance policy, which I'd been paying, would lapse in 30 days unless she arranged her own coverage. I wasn't being vindictive. I was being thorough. At 9 a.m., my phone started ringing. Laura, calling from what I assumed was Derek's truck, since her GPS location showed her leaving the motel area. I let it go to voicemail. "Nathan, please pick up. We need to talk about this. I know you're angry, but we can work through this. I made a mistake, but that doesn't mean we have to throw away 8 years of marriage. Please call me back." 12 more calls over the next hour. I listened to each voicemail, analyzing her strategy. Initially, she tried contrition mixed with minimization. She'd made a mistake. It was just physical. She still loved me and wanted to save our marriage. By the 6th call, anger crept in. How dare I track her movements? How dare I follow her? What gave me the right to make unilateral decisions about our marriage? By the 10th call, desperation. She needed clothes, needed access to money, needed to know where she was supposed to live while we worked things out. I never answered. Sunday afternoon, I loaded the boxes into my truck and drove to Laura's parents' house in the suburbs. Dan and Carol Matthews had never particularly liked me. I was too analytical, too focused on practical matters, not emotional enough for their daughter. Today, they would learn exactly how emotional I could be. Carol answered the door, her expression shifting from surprise to confusion as she saw the boxes. "Nathan? What's going on?" Laura called yesterday, but she was so upset we could barely understand. "Laura had an affair," I said simply. "She's been meeting a contractor named Derek Hartwell at motels for at least 2 months. I caught them Friday night. These are her things." Dan appeared behind his wife, his face already hardening. "Now hold on. I have documentation." I set down the first box and handed Carol a manila folder. "Credit card receipts, GPS tracking data, photographs. Laura chose to destroy our marriage. I'm choosing to protect my assets." Carol opened the folder, scanning the evidence with growing horror. The restaurant receipts, the hotel charges, the timeline I'd constructed showing Laura's movements over the past month. "This doesn't mean you have to divorce her," Dan said, but his voice lacked conviction. "People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated deception that lasted months." I set down another box. "She created elaborate fictional alibis. She bought new clothes to wear for him. She told me she was trying to get pregnant while buying condoms for her lover." Carol was crying now, still holding the evidence folder. "Where is she?" "Probably with Derek, trying to figure out her next move. She's called me 17 times since yesterday. I haven't answered." I spent the next 20 minutes unloading boxes while Laura's parents processed the destruction of their daughter's marriage. They asked questions I answered factually. How long had I known? What was my plan? Was there any possibility of reconciliation? "No," I said to the last question. "Laura made her choice. She chose Derek over me, chose deception over honesty, chose to risk everything we built for motel room sex with a contractor. I'm simply responding to the choice she already made." As I drove away from the Matthews house, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "This is Derek. We need to talk." I deleted the message without responding. Monday brought new challenges. Laura had apparently spent Sunday night at her parents' house because Carol Matthews called my office at 10 a.m. "Nathan, Laura needs access to some money, just for basics, food, gas, a place to stay while you two work this out." We're not working anything out, Carol. Laura has a college degree and work experience. She can get a job, I replied. She can't just start over with nothing. I cut her off. She didn't start with nothing. She started with a husband, a home, and a stable marriage. She chose to gamble all of that for an affair. Sometimes you lose. The call from Derek came Tuesday evening. I was reviewing network security reports when my phone rang, displaying the same number that had sent the text. This time I answered. "We need to talk," Derek said without preamble. "No, we don't," I replied. "Look, man, I didn't know the whole situation. Laura told me you two were separated, practically divorced already." "And you believed her?" I asked. She was always emotional about you, about how you didn't understand her, how the marriage was over, but you were too stubborn to admit it." I let the silence stretch, making Derek fill it. "The point is, I got pulled into something I didn't fully understand. I'm not the bad guy here." "You f***ed another man's wife in motel rooms, Derek. You're exactly the bad guy here," I shouted. "She said—" He stammered, so I cut him off. "She lied. To you, to me, to her parents, to everyone. The difference is, I was married to her. You were just convenient." "I care about her," he replied. "Then you'll understand why you need to stay away from her. Laura's facing the consequences of her choices. Don't make her consequences become your consequences." I hung up before he could respond. Wednesday brought the most satisfying development. Margaret Hayes called with an update on the divorce proceedings. "Your wife's attorney wants to discuss settlement terms. Apparently she's retained James Whitmore." I knew the name. Whitmore specialized in high-asset divorces, particularly cases where he could paint his clients as victims of emotional or financial abuse. "What's his angle?" I asked. "He's claiming you've engaged in controlling behavior, monitoring her movements, cutting off her access to funds, making unilateral decisions about marital property. He wants temporary spousal support and shared custody of marital assets until the divorce is finalized." Shared custody of assets she helped destroy through adultery? That's essentially what I told him. We have documented proof of infidelity. The GPS tracking was legal. The car is titled in both names. The financial moves were protective measures taken after discovering fraud. Whitmore's playing a weak hand. Thursday evening, Laura came to the house. I watched through the security system I'd upgraded earlier that week as she pulled into our driveway in a car I didn't recognize, probably borrowed from her parents. She walked to the front door and rang the bell, then knocked when I didn't answer. "Nathan, I know you're home. I can see your car. We need to talk." I remained in my study, watching her through the camera feed. She looked different, tired, older somehow. The confident woman who'd been radiant at that motel door had been replaced by someone who clearly hadn't slept well in days. "Nathan, please. I know you're angry, but this is insane. We can work through this if you'll just talk to me." After 10 minutes, she left. But not before trying the back door, checking windows, and attempting to use the garage door remote that I'd already reprogrammed. Friday brought news that made the entire week worthwhile. Margaret Hayes called with an update that made me smile for the first time since finding those condoms. Derek Hartwell was attacked outside Murphy's pub last night. Someone broke his jaw and 3 ribs. The police report says no witnesses came forward and Hartwell isn't cooperating with the investigation. "That's unfortunate," I said. "Indeed. Also, interesting timing. Apparently, Hartwell had been bragging about his relationship with your wife to some of the regulars at Murphy's, talking about how he'd stolen her from her uptight husband. People say foolish things when they drink. They do, especially when they don't realize who might be listening. Murphy's is a working-class bar, Nathan. Lot of married men who don't appreciate hearing about affairs." I hadn't set foot in Murphy's pub. Hadn't spoken to anyone about Derek beyond our single phone conversation. But sometimes information finds its way to people who know how to use it properly. "Any word on settlement discussions?" I asked. Whitmore's backing down. Apparently, Laura's situation has become more complicated. Without Derek as emotional support and facing the reality of starting over at 34 with no income and parents who are less than thrilled with her choices, she's becoming more amenable to accepting your terms. Which are? I asked. She gets her personal belongings and nothing else. No spousal support, no claim on the house or retirement accounts, no division of assets acquired during the marriage. In exchange, you won't pursue her for the money she spent on her affair, the hotel charges, the gifts, the elaborate dinners she charged to your joint credit card. That's more than fair. It's generous. Most men in your position would take her for every penny. That evening, I sat in my study with a fresh glass of whiskey, reviewing the week's accomplishments. Laura's belongings removed from our home. Divorce proceedings advancing on favorable terms. Derek Hartwell learning that actions have consequences. The house was quiet, organized, efficient. Every system functioning as designed. I'd solved the problem. 6 months later, I still sleep on the left side of the bed. It's habit more than sentiment. 8 years of marriage creates patterns that outlast the relationship itself. The house remains exactly as it was, minus Laura's belongings and the photographs I donated to charity. I've made no effort to redecorate or claim the space as exclusively mine. It simply is what it is. A house where a married couple once lived, now occupied by a divorced man who learned not to trust without verification. The divorce was finalized in February. Laura signed the papers without contest, taking only her personal items and a car that her parents helped her purchase. She'd found work at a marketing firm downtown, entry-level position, significant pay cut from her previous career, but it was employment. According to mutual acquaintances, she'd moved into a studio apartment across town and was doing her best to start over. I haven't seen her since that Thursday evening when she stood on our front porch pleading for conversation. I haven't heard her voice since the last voicemail she left 3 weeks after our motel confrontation. In that final message, her tone had shifted from anger to resignation. I know you'll never forgive me, Nathan. Maybe I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for all of it. For throwing away what we had for something that meant nothing. I'd deleted the message without saving it. Derek Hartwell's recovery took longer than expected. A broken jaw requires surgery, and 3 fractured ribs complicated his breathing for weeks. He'd been unable to work for 2 months, which in the construction industry means lost contracts and damaged reputation. From what I'd heard through carefully maintained information networks, Derek had stopped frequenting Murphy's pub and rarely discussed his personal life with anyone. Sometimes problems solve themselves when the right information reaches the right people at the right time. I've been dating, though casually. Professional women who understand boundaries and don't ask probing questions about my previous marriage. There's Susan, a financial advisor I met through work networking, and Amanda, who manages IT systems for a healthcare company. Both relationships are structured with clear expectations and regular reassessment. I treat relationships like security protocols now. Trust requires authentication, verification, and regular audits. Emotional access is granted incrementally, with defined privileges and monitoring capabilities. It's not romantic, but romance was what made me vulnerable to Laura's deception. The GPS tracker I'd used to monitor Laura's movements now sits in my desk drawer, a reminder of necessary precautions. I've installed security cameras around the property, not from paranoia, but from an understanding that information is protection. Knowledge prevents surprises, and surprises are how systems fail. My work has expanded. Word spreads in professional circles about competency and discretion. Colleagues seek my advice on personal security, background verification, protection of digital assets. I've become known as someone who understands how to safeguard what matters. Thursday evenings, I drive past the Sunset Inn on my way to a client meeting across town. The motel remains unchanged, pink stucco walls, flickering vacancy sign, the same aura of temporary arrangements and questionable decisions. Room 117 is visible from the parking lot, just another door in a row of identical doors. Sometimes there are cars parked outside, other people making choices they'll regret. I don't slow down or dwell on memories. It's simply a landmark, no different from any other building along that stretch of road. Laura attempted contact twice more after the divorce was finalized. Once through her mother, asking if I would consider meeting for coffee to discuss closure. Once through a mutual friend from our previous social circle, wondering if there was any possibility of maintaining a friendship. Both requests were declined politely but firmly. Last month, I received information through a professional contact that Laura had been terminated from her marketing position. Attendance issues, according to the source. Too many sick days, too many personal calls, general inability to focus on work responsibilities. She'd found new employment at a retail store, part-time hours, minimum wage plus commission. The information came with no request for action on my part. Sometimes people simply share updates about individuals they know you've been monitoring. Professional courtesy between people who understand the value of current intelligence. I felt nothing upon hearing about Laura's employment difficulties. No satisfaction, no concern, no residual anger. She'd become what she'd always been destined to become after making her choices, someone else's problem to solve or ignore. Tonight, I'm reviewing quarterly security assessments for 3 corporate clients, updating protocols based on emerging threats and vulnerabilities. The work is methodical, systematic, intellectually satisfying. Problems have solutions if you understand the underlying systems and maintain proper oversight. The rain has started again, drumming against my study windows with the same rhythm it had that October evening when I discovered condoms in my wife's purse. But now the sound is simply weather, atmospheric conditions that require no analysis or response. I haven't heard Laura's voice in 187 days. I prefer it that way. Trust, I've learned, should always come with conditions and verification. Even then, it's subject to regular review and immediate revocation upon evidence of system compromise. The whiskey tastes exactly as it should. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.